Good evening, and let me start with greeting all of you all and conveying my good wishes on this day, the GST Day. It is with the very dedicated efforts of each one of you all that we are here celebrating the 6th year. And 6th year after 2 or 3 years of very difficult situation because of the COVID, and the recovery today, where you find media reports talking about monthly GST collections remaining above 1.6 lakh crores as the new normal. It is completely unbelievable, It's an unbelievable story of sheer dedication, commitment, and grit with which each one of you all have served the nation, and the credit goes to you today. So, all my appreciations. Equally, my appreciations to all those who have won the commendations and also the awards for your dedicated service. So, Revenue Secretary, Chairman of the CBIC, member of the CBIC, my colleague, and all officers, retired members of the board, and to all of you, it's a moment where the government can feel extremely proud of a dedicated set of officers performing their sovereign function, but proving it to the nation that nothing will stop in the mandate given by the Parliament getting fully implemented with full force from the bureaucracy which is behind it, which is the Indian Revenue Service. So congratulations to each one of you. I would just want to very quickly recollect how this journey has been made possible. Of course, it was in 2000 that this entire discussion about GST had commenced under the then Prime Minister, Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee. It was first suggested then that we'll have a GST, and some work had commenced. It hadn't seen the light of the day. It went on like that. And it was not till the first introduction into the Parliament in 2014 that you had an idea that this is actually a working proposition, and the Parliament took it up. And within 2 years after that, the 101st Constitutional Amendment Act had been passed in the Parliament, and subsequently, by September of 2016, we had 50% of all states actually coming up with the respective states' own bills, and therefore, this path-breaking new legislation for a new India to bring in one tax for the entire country really saw the light of the day. And since 2016-17, actually from 2017, economic integration as one India. My honorable colleague mentioned how for integrating India, the then Home Minister Sardar Patel had made a tremendous effort. For economic integration, the GST was just that signal which all of us really welcomed. Before the GST, and of course I'm not getting into how many taxes, 17 of them, and then also some 13 cesses were all subsumed into this GST, making it simpler for the country. But the fact remains that the fragmented economic affairs, fragmented indirect taxation regime which prevailed all over the country, actually, in reality, caused a burden on the consumer, in that there were gray areas, there were tax overtax, So tax on tax effect actually kept goods highly expensive. Now, this is one point which I'm going to repeat in my address today, that tax on tax had actually taken many of the goods to well over 31% in terms of taxation. And that time, with all the desire to have one taxation in the country, we still didn't think that that was outrageous and named that tax as anything, like the way in which we hear some leaders telling us about GST being a burdensome tax. But what system prevailed earlier was indeed burdensome, in that a tax on tax had added on to the burden. And I'll show you with a few figures to show how the introduction of GST has actually brought the net actual tax on the consumer down, and in some cases remarkably down. And despite this reality, you still have a lot of people confusing the minds of the people, saying GST has actually burdened the society. Actually not. And therefore, it is necessary for all of us to recognize this tax, its importance in making sure that it, on the one hand, does justice to the consumers in having brought the rates down and having removed the double taxation element, and on the other, making sure genuinely what the governments will have to earn in terms of taxation is being collected systematically without any personal level discretion. So that is the big story of GST, which I think will have to be repeatedly said, articulated, and conveyed to the people so that misleading news about GST is addressed, because it is a fact that GST has made life easy. GST has made life easy for small businesses, and GST has made it easy for goods to move freely in this country. So the tax on tax effect has got to be explained with proper figures, and also to explain it to the people so that it is going to drive home the point that GST is not just for business simplification, it is also for ultimate benefit to the consumer. So I just want to highlight how on many common use items, the tax incidence under the GST has been much lower compared to the pre-GST. For example, in items like pasteurized milk, tea, milk powder, sugar, edible vegetable oils, spices and footwear, which are priced up to 500 rupees, whatever relevant unit it may be of measure, attract taxes of 5% under GST, compared with earlier tax incidence of 6 to 10%. So naturally, these items, which are commonplace items, are now taxed less. And again, for example, hair oil, toothpaste, soaps, perfumes, detergents, and on all these items, the average pre-GST tax burden was almost 28%, which was brought down to 18% under the GST. So these are tangible numbers. So if somebody were to comment saying GST actually has brought in burden, and I don't want to repeat the full expression, but it is a fact that it's been called Gabbar Singh tax, which is a shame, because this country should know a step like GST has actually brought relief to the common citizens. So the average pre-GST taxation on common use electrical items, for instance, such as mixers, grinders, fridge, refrigerators, vacuum cleaners, and TV. And all of them, the TV, for instance, I'm quoting 27 inches television, and washing machines, they were all at 31.5%, and now they've come down to 12% under GST, and these are no longer luxury items. These are now essential, and for middle class, where particularly it's a small household where both the spouses are working, these are essential items for better functioning of the household. And if this has been brought down to 12%, we can understand that from an ordinary toothpaste up to these kind of items, prices coming down is actually benefiting the ordinary citizen. Many bathroom and tiles, toilet tile fittings, doors, windows, and frames were earlier taxed at an average of 28%. Now they are all brought down to 18%. So I'm purposely giving. It's not as if the officials here who have actually worked in implementing the system do not know the figures. But we also have a very eminent set of senior journalists seated here. It is they who have to convey through their columns, through their news reports, through their analysis, that GST actually means, in terms of items that are used by common citizens, a relief in terms of the tax, the double tax being avoided, tax on tax being avoided, and actual rates coming down on common man's items. So I'm more for the media who are here, for whose sake I'm repeating these numbers, and those of you who are here, part of the CBIC, the Revenue Service, pardon me for repeating something which you probably know at the fingertips. I don't need to tell you anything more on it. But it is for the media that I'm using this opportunity to say how the GST actually means a common man's relief as a tax, and that is why I'm repeating this. Now, movie tickets. Again, I remember I was in Commerce Ministry, and at that time, at the introduction of GST, there were a lot of confusion prevailing. Movie tickets, at least in some states, when, because of GST, the rates were coming down, the local authorities imposed their own taxes. But the impression which went around among common people was, because of GST, even movie in a very inexpensive theater is now being charged highly. But that wasn't the case. Movie tickets, which were taxed at almost 35%, were brought down to 12% for tickets up to 100 rupees and to 18% for tickets more than 100 rupees. That was GST. But if locally some states saw a hike in the rates, it wasn't due to GST. Even now, I would think at every level, and this I appeal to the officers, at every level, it is important after every GST council meeting that officers immediately be aware of the changes made, so that if there are any tweakings or if there are any misconceptions, you are there to address, saying, no, that's not what the GST Council has decided. Anything else could have happened, but it is not GST Council's. That clarity in time will have to be given. Otherwise, the confusion which prevails, in spite of the good work that you do, brings back a certain confusion and misconception that the GST probably needs to be looked into. It is not being fair to the common man. It is completely fair to the common man because the decisions taken in the council are taken by finance ministers who come from various states, who certainly will keep the common man in their mind as much as we would keep. And therefore, it is important to remove misconceptions at every stage immediately rather than delay it. Now, if pre-GST compared with GST so favorably projects the figures of GST at the time of introduction, post the introduction, the GST rates have been periodically reviewed, and even from the time of introduction to now, there is further reduction in rates on very many items. So it's not as if today, 2023, standing 6 years after the introduction, I'm still saying that pre-GST we had such rates. Today, after the introduction, rates have come down. But even after the introduction of GST, we have further worked on it to further bring down prices. I want to give you some examples even of such reductions. Reduction from 28% GST at the time of introduction, that is, to 5% were made on very many items. Tires seats, parts, accessories for carriages, for particularly Divyang, rubber waste, aircraft engines were all brought down from 28% to 5%. Now I'm comparing after introduction of GST to today, 6 years later. Again, reduction from 28% GST to 12%. Earlier was 28 to 5. Now I'm talking of examples of 28 to 12. Tableware, kitchenware, other household articles, office and desk equipments, luggage and travel accessories, and idols of wood, stone, and metals, medical-grade oxygen, parts of many agricultural and forestry machinery, tanks, armored vehicles, etc. So even they have come down from 28% to 12%. Now, reduction in tax from 28 to 18%. I'll give you examples again between the time of introduction to today. Common use items, furniture, wood items, many other electrical equipments, and components such as for switches, cables, wires, fans, pumps, lamps, and other fittings, suitcases and bags, paints, sporting and gym equipments, musical instruments, and watches. So the point that I'm trying to highlight here is not just before the introduction to after introduction, but even after introduction to today, there is a constant attempt by the GST Council to make it simpler, to make it easier, to make it less burdensome for our consumers. There have been also not just the 28% items coming down to something 18, 12, or 5, but also 18% items have also come down. Now, items from 18 to 5 are several. Food items such as peanut and sesame chickies, groundnuts, sweets, labeled puffed rice, the rub, I think I always wonder how to pronounce this, the sugarcane juice, rub, which is largely, rab, okay, rab, which is largely an item of interest in Uttar Pradesh, have all come down from 18 to 5. Similarly, reduction of tax from 18 to 12 have also happened. Drip irrigation systems, yarn, fly ash, bricks, food items such as sugar, boiled confectionery, and so on. In fact, condensed milk, mixed on condiments, refined sugar, cubes, and decorative objects. 12 to 5 also has a list of common items, medicines, and so on. Electrical vehicles have also come down from 12 to 5. Unbranded Ayurvedic, Unani, Siddha, homeopathic medicines, orthopedic appliances have all come down as well. So, over and above this, at the time of introduction, there was an item which was at the 3% level. That's also come down to 0.25. And that is the rough industrial diamonds, precious stones, and semi-precious stones. The idea being that these are job-creating sectors. They also have enough export potential, and therefore the rates have been kept as low as that. I hope it is not something which we've forgotten, that the GST has also items which are being exempted in total. It is important now to remember them once more so that our friends from the media will remember that GST continuously improves on reduction in tax rates so that the incidence that falls on the common consumer is low, but also keep the items which are completely exempted kept high on the agenda. Items which are not sold pre-packaged and labeled are completely exempted. There was a lot of discussion about it because there was a lot of misconception, but I repeat, paneer, dried makhana, wheat, rice flour, cereal flour, puffed rice, etc., honey, and so on, curd, are all exempted from GST when they are pre-packaged, when they are not sold as pre-packaged. So are sanitary napkins. So are stone, marble, and wood deities, khadi products from the Khadi Village Industries Commission. Charka for hand spinning yarns are exempted. Hearing aids and parts of hearing aids are exempted. Life-saving drugs are exempted, and so on. So if these goods are exempted, services are also exempted. Some of them, healthcare, educational services, midday meal catering, and so on. Public transport services, auto rickshaws, metered cabs, metro, and agricultural services are all exempt. Now, one point on which there is frequently a discussion, and that is, all right, you have explained about common consumers not paying very high rate, but what about the center-state relations? What about the way in which you're distributing the revenue that you collect to the states and so on? I just want to highlight that the first thing, also mentioned by Revenue Secretary when he spoke, the number of taxpayers registered in GST has almost doubled to 1.4 crores in June 2023 from a relatively small number of 67.83 lakhs in July 2017. So the tax net is widening. The comments made by one Big Four firm observing the functions of GST was already mentioned. 22% year-on-year growth in the GST revenue is a testimony to the overall economic development, taxpayer-centric administration. Really speaks about how this GST is now improving. And about 88% of MSME respondents have also, in the survey, have also acknowledged that the reduced cost of goods and services, attributing it to the improved uniformity with which GST regime is implemented. So this is also reflected in the fact that when we saw the video presentation, I take this one example of the Quarterly Return and Monthly Payment Scheme, the QRMP. It has benefited about 44 lakh MSMEs who are taxpayers and therefore made compliance far more easier. System is also being improved as much as the rates are also being brought down. So the features of GST will have to be looked at from so many different angles, all of which are improving. And as a result of which, there's been resilience in the economy. I would just highlight some 4 major points bulleted. Maximum e-way bill generated in a day is 37.74 lakhs. In a day, the system generates 37.74 lakh e-way bills. That's a maximum we've done on one day. Similarly, highest payment transactions which has happened in a day is 9.78 lakh rupees. Transactions. Highest return filing in a day, 24.85 lakhs in a day. Now, I am unable to resist my temptation to recall the troubles that this digital platform had at one point in time. It was such a anguish-creating, GST, what's this? This portal is not good, it's not happening. Please call Infosys, ask them to talk, ask them to improve it. Today, on a single day, that very system takes 24.85 lakh return filing. The tenacity of that system has been so improved. Otherwise, on a single day for that portal to take this and be ready for more wouldn't have happened. Again, as a result of the dedicated work of our team with the Infosys to get the system a lot more updated is bearing result. And the last data I'd like to share here is maximum e-invoice uploaded in a month. I'd like the media to give a special attention to this data. Maximum e-invoice uploaded in a month is 17.48 crores. So that's the system's resilience. And unless the system, together with officials who are dealing with it, have not responded in time and adequately, this kind of data, this set of data that I've given you, proving every day, each day, where it has worked in favor, will not happen. So I just want to make sure that this kind of scaling up which the GST system has done is recognized by each one of us, as much as the media, so that people of India can feel proud that this nation's taxation system is a lot more professionally run, digitally run, efficiently run, and as a result of which we find the results today, and confront anyone who would want to have misconceptions built to shame this country. This is the country which has given GST, which is now appreciated globally and has improved tax efficiency. We cannot afford to have people slight us without reason. I will not elaborate on the fake invoice tracking which the chairman CBIC has spoken about. Now the collections have improved. The new normal is being talked about. If only the fake invoices and the claim, the fraudulent claims, I mean, am I right in saying it's about 13,900, nearly 14,000 crores which are part of this fake claims? You can imagine to what extent that also will be adding to the tax buoyancy. And therefore, I want these hard facts to be mentioned to the credit of each one of you who have worked and dispel this myth about GST is not delivering for this country. On the contrary, it has brought in relief to the taxpayer and to the businesses which so depend on it. I did talk about the center and states. We've held the GST Council meeting 49 times till now. Decisions except for one have all been taken through consensus. It was just one occasion when it had to be informally, but yet with a division. So I want to underline the fact that despite all the campaigns which happen against the GST and the GST Council, it's been a superlative, federal, reflective of the federal spirit of this country. So that is very important for us to carry forward our work in the future as well. One data, again, for center-state relations I want to give for the sake of the tax comparisons. Before GST, states' tax growth was only 8.3%, while GDP growth was 11.5%, meaning a low buoyancy of below 1 at 0.72. This means that the state's tax revenues were growing slower than the GDP itself. That is before the GST. I wish this point is fully understood and taken forward to communicate to everyone on this issue. And after GST, the tax growth was 12.3%, while GDP growth was 9.8%, resulting in a high buoyancy of 1.22%, and I'm talking about years 2018 to 2023. So, pre-GST and post-GST, let's understand GST has brought in greater tax buoyancy, as a result of which more than the GST growth, your GSDP growth, your tax collection is growing. Therefore, both center and states benefit. So for those who are raising doubts about, oh no, states are now suffering, there's not enough, Absolutely no truth in that. We have to dispel this myth that states are losing out after having joined hands for GST. There are some people, I hear less of it nowadays. Earlier, there were some people who were commenting by saying, oh, after having joined the GST, our state is suffering. No, today no state suffers after GST. And that is despite COVID. That is despite the revenue collection having come down in that year. Now the quick recovery, the new normal, all prove that states have not lost out. On the contrary, their tax buoyancy has gone up post-GST. So I just want this to be absolutely made clear. With this kind of a tax buoyancy, even without the GST compensation, because I know there are lots of people who research into this and who would say, all right, states' revenues improved because you gave them compensation which was on a higher plank, much more than what they would have expected to grow at, and therefore this buoyancy and this collection has happened. But no, I want to give you one more data to prove. Even without the GST compensation, state GST revenues have witnessed a buoyancy of 1.15. Earlier, I told you 1.22, which may be also because of compensation. But without compensation, 1.15 is the growth which is much higher than compared to pre-GST buoyancy. So all this, I've taken quite some time explaining from all points of view, from all directions. I'm grateful for the indulgence that you've shown me in patiently listening to me. I felt it is important because on this day, it is not because a minister is praising you, or it's not because, you know, the collection is going up and that is public anyway. On every first of the month you get to know. It's not because of that. But because of the fact that whether it is the common consumer, whether it's the state governments, whether it's a matter of tax buoyancy, whether it's a question of making it digital and then making it simpler, GST stands out as an exemplar. And that's thankful to you. Thanks to you, it has come out like that. And it is, for the first time post-independence, that a federal institution, the GST Council, has been formed through an act of our parliament, and that institution's functioning also has proved that an institution of this stature can deliver for the welfare of the people and also make officials and the people of India proud for what it has done in just 6 years. So all my appreciation, wishing you all the very best, and I'm indeed thankful for the brilliant work that you've done. Thank you.